Welcome to Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mark, and today's guest makes me feel exotic. Welcome David Nagler to the show. David grew up in a very musical house. In fact, his first performance was at age 1 or 2 in a stage production of The King and I. But that was just the beginning, a very early beginning. He began taking piano lessons a few years later, but he began his musical career with the band Stretch, and that soon became Nova Social. Same guys, new name. The band was initially a guitar-based band with smart lyrics. But that was the first album. The second took a hard left turn into electronics, still with excellent lyrics. When David decided to go solo, he took yet another left turn. And this is where his Brazilian influences began to bubble to the top. He's written some themed albums, one based on Donald Trump appointees and another written to the poems of Carl Sandburg. David's latest work is called As for the Future. He tells me how he came up with that unusual name and who else is involved in the band. The project began during the pandemic, so much of it was created remotely. That included Spotify stalking people to be in the band. The album is filled with masterful songwriting. I love the music, and the lyrics fell right in line with David's previous work. It's one of those albums that I'll listen to when I need a break from the heavier rock I normally listen to. Go grab it on Bandcamp or stream it from your favorite service. I recommend the deluxe CD version with the extra tracks on it. Follow the band at As for the Future, and hopefully you can catch a gig in the near future. Follow us at Performance ANX on X and Instagram. Merch is at performanceanx.threadless.com. You can help support us through ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety. And I hope you enjoyed David Nagler on Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network.
Hey, this is David Nagler from As for the Future. You can check us out at asforthefuture.bandcamp.com. Our new record will be out on June 14, 2024. And you are listening to Performance Anxiety Podcast with your host, Mark Shea. Great. Perfect. One and done. Yeah.
The way I normally like to start things is to find out a little bit about your musical background, how you got into it. Because the new album, As for the Future, it is, I love it. It is so cool. Awesome. It's so different from anything I've heard in such a long time. Because it's, and then we'll get into it when we get there, but I mean, it's very Brazilian bossa nova, samba based, and it's not something that I would normally pick up on my own.
Right.
But when, Howard reached out and said, "Hey, would you be interested in talking with David?" Yeah. Like, let me listen to the music. And I listened, and I'm like, this is so cool.
Cool. I'm so glad.
It is such a breath of fresh air to a lot of the big, heavy stuff that I would normally listen to. And then you don't even realize you get kind of tired of it sometimes. So, so it's a sorbet, if you will.
Oh, cool. That's one. I'm so glad to hear. Thank you.
But because
sorbet like trade.
But it's a genre of music you don't hear done in a modern way very often, and so that piqued my curiosity as to what did you grow up on? What kind of music were you listening to? Because I also went back and listened to some of your earlier work, like Nova Social, which was really cool. I really love the first Nova Social album.
Oh, good.
But that sounds nothing like As for the Future. So I'm so curious as to what got you into music in the first place and what you're listening to, and I will let you speak now. I've done enough of that.
Okay. Sure. Okay. Well, I mean, I was into music when I was like, I don't know, 1 or 2.
Wow.
My dad is he's a musician. He plays piano, and he went to Juilliard when he was growing up. So somewhere around, I think, like when he was in junior high. So he learned he was a classical player, and he played a lot of like kind of pop and musical theater kind of standard stuff. So that was kind of his thing. And he never like made a career out of music. But when he's worked in radio news for his like entire life.
Okay.
But one of his sort of side gigs was he would like be like a musical director for shows at like summer camp productions.
Oh, neat.
So like there was a summer camp up in Canada that like he was the MD for like, you know, a production for instance, my first stage production when I was like 1 or 2 was he was in The King and I. I was a little nepo baby. And so I got cast as the youngest son of the king in The King and I when I was like 1 or 2 or something. And my big sort of, apparently I don't remember this, but my big scene steal was like crawling through the king's legs. Like that was like what I did when I was like 1 or 2. So that was, and so they kind of introduced me to like a lot of like musical theater and like stuff that my parents were into. I mean, they were into some pop too, like the Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel and such, but really they were into musicals. And so that was kind of their thing. And so I would like, they'd give me songbooks and I would like read along with the songs and stuff like that. And so that was something I did. But my mom has 4 brothers and all of them are musical. And 2 of them actually have a band and have had a band for like 50 years. And so this is in like the town of Pompton Lakes, New Jersey, which is Jersey suburbs. And so they were kind of like a kind of bar and wedding band that started during their like high school. And you know, and they've played, you know, they've never been an original band, but they've always played like covers of just stuff that they like, and you know, some of the sort of local friends and fans come out to see them and they like these songs too. And so that's what they've been doing for a really long time. So they were, I guess, in a way, the ones that sort of got me more into like rock music at a pretty young age. So so my first favorite band was Seals and Crofts.
Oh, wow. Summer Breeze.
And I saw them twice.
Really?
Yeah. And the first one I fell asleep during. Like, I don't think I saw any of it. They were both at this outdoor space, which is now called, I think it's PNC Bank Arts Center in Jersey, but it was called Garden State Arts Center. Yep. When I saw it when I was 7. I'm sure you're familiar with it if you're from Central Jersey.
Yeah, I saw many shows there. David Lee Roth, in fact.
Oh my gosh.
It was a triple bill. It was who the hell it was Cinderella opened Extreme, Cinderella, and David Lee Roth, I think.
So that's like 89 or 90 or something.
Yes. It was right before college. So it was like 89 or 90. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
It was his, what that Little Ain't Enough album with the Comfortable Shoes. So it was his big hit off of that.
Oh my God.
Sensible Shoes.
I don't think...
Sensible Shoes.
Is that the one with the
devil on the cover?
What's the record? Like a skyscraper?
That was the one right before that.
That's the one before it.
Okay. Yeah, that's Steve Vai on it. This one had Jason Becker.
Right.
Before he this was I know we're going way off topic here. This was the tour happened right after he got diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. So he couldn't tour. So I didn't get a chance to see Jason Becker play. I don't even know who the guitarist was, but he was really good. But it wasn't Steve Vai and it wasn't Jason Becker. So I was just like, all right, well. Yeah. But it was a good show.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to you.
Right around that time. This is the last one we talk about. But right around that time, I saw Don Henley at the Garden State Arts Center. So he would have had like his End of the Innocence tour, and that would have been. And so, for instance, the Eagles, bringing it back, were a band that like my uncles, you know, got me into when I was in like 2nd grade.
Oh, okay.
And so,
second grade into the Eagles.
2nd grade.
Nice.
And so like, and the Eagles to me, I sort of have 2 memories of wanting to be a songwriter. And one of them was the Eagles, because Hotel California is such a weird song.
Yeah.
And, you know, and like I didn't know anything of what it was about. I still am not 100% sure I know what it's about. But like at that age... right, that's true. And so, but at that age, I was like, this is so weird. And so, like, that kind of got me into this idea of songwriting. Okay. And also, like, my dad working for radio would bring me back kind of like random cassettes of interviews that he would get from like the whatever company he was working for at the time. And so there was a Paul Simon interview, and I remember around the time One Trick Pony, I guess, around the time of this one, and I remember, you know, being like, oh, this is so cool. I want to, like, these were the 2 sort of bands around the time that made me want to write songs, I think.
Oh,
and
excellent.
So I kind of started
choices.
Trying to write songs. Right, yeah. And in some ways they kind of, Paul Simon for sure, sort of set this idea of like how interested I was in being lyrically focused, like how significant the lyrics were to me. And I always sort of wanted to, that was like a thing that I've kind of kept with me for years, is like how important lyrics are, and like, you know, that they shouldn't be like just sort of tossed off or whatever.
Right.
But,
yeah. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Before you skip over this ad, give me 1 minute. Like most podcasts, I pick sponsors carefully, and I use the products that advertise here. Pure Spectrum CBD is a product that has been really beneficial for me. They have a wide variety of great products that can be used on a daily or as needed basis. I've been using the tincture every day, and it's been wonderful for easing anxiety. And I absolutely love the isolate. I use it instead of acetaminophen or ibuprofen, and it's worked so well for the relief of aches and pains. They also have soaks, lotions, salves, gummies, and more, plus an entire line for fitness recovery. They even have products for your pets. See everything they offer at purespectrumcbd.com. And if you have questions, they're there to help. They helped me when I had no idea where to start. After you fill your cart, use code PerformanceANX for 15% off your purchase. Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD.
But anyway, so those were, you know, I just got into rock music at a very early age, but also like, you know, I was still into musical theater, and I was doing like musical theater productions all through like elementary school. And so like, it was sort of a mix of all these sort of things, but it was definitely rock music. And once MTV started, you know, in 80 or 81, I became like, I was addicted. And so I watched like, it was like, it would have been third grade, and I would have watched like 7 or 8 hours a day of MTV. Right. And so that kind of really shaped a lot of my musical interests at the time, stuff that was maybe a little bit more new wave. Also, Hall & Oates was big, and like post-prog Asia type stuff, and post-punk Adam and the Ants, you know, whatever, like all that kind of stuff. Because
everything at that point was post whatever.
Right, that's true. Yeah, totally.
And I thought of something just hit me. So your dad's bringing you home these cassettes of interviews. Yeah. So basically, you were into podcasts before podcasts were podcasts.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
He brought me this is a few years later, but he brought me back this giant. This is on vinyl. He brought me back this giant box of vinyl for like a syndicated radio show called The Royalty of Rock. And it was like, and it was like kind of like the big one. So like the Beatles were 2 albums, and the Stones were 2 albums, and maybe the Who were 2 albums. And then as it got, you know, a little bit less massively popular, there's 1 album, and maybe there's like a split of like 2 bands on 1 record or whatever. Okay. And it's just like kind of like little, you know, they have like little bits or entire songs and like little quotes and from like the artists and stuff. And so that was totally like a huge thing for me. I mean, I used to listen to that stuff all the time. So in some ways, like hearing musicians speak about music was like almost as big a thing as the music itself. That makes a lot of sense, because I didn't have that, but had album liner notes, and that's what I would read those things voraciously, and I found some of my favorite bands by reading the thank yous in those things. So a little different, but I can understand what you're saying. So that's a huge part of it. So and I'm what am I trying to say? The influence of Paul Simon on you is incredibly evident, because it's one of the things I've noticed going back and listening to, you know, full disclosure, I haven't had a chance to listen to everything, but I've listened to as much as I could. All right.
The lyrics are what struck me as being the most outstanding part of the music. I mean, the music is fantastic, but no matter what band you're in, what project you're doing, the lyrics are just, it's the standout. They're very well thought out. You can tell you take a lot of care and a lot of precision in what you write and what you say. It's absolutely evident. Were you writing music early on? Because I've got, and we'll get to this, because I've got a question about some of your early music. So, when did you start writing, and how soon until you were playing in bands?
Well, I guess so. I started writing songs that were just kind of I don't know, not really anything, but basically somewhere around like second grade. So like somewhere around by the time I was like 8 or something. And then, but then around the time I was 12 was when I first actually had a band. So my very close guitar playing friend, Alan Rubenstein, who I'm still in touch with and who was a member of sort of the band I had before Nova Social, we started a band with a drummer and we just kind of played, I don't know, basically our thing was we started playing bar and bat mitzvah after parties. That was kind of our circuit. Nice. When we were in 7th grade. So there'd be like a bar and bat mitzvah during the day on like a Saturday afternoon. And then the kids would have like kids back to their house later and we would play. And so we were playing just like songs, mostly covers. But that was around the time that I first started, I would say, writing songs. Okay. Was in junior high, but like, I didn't know it's amazing to me now when you hear teens and like younger who like have these songs that are just so fully formed and amazing. Cause I wasn't even anywhere close to that sort of stuff.
Yeah. It's good and bad. Technology has done that, because there's no way you're like, I think we're pretty similar in age and there's just no way that I would have been able to do something like that. I mean, I tried to play guitar and I have issues now. I'm 50 years old and I can't do it. But being able to pull up, just, being able to record on your phone and it helps them out so much. But I also get a little, I don't know. I think a little bit of, this may sound maybe Pollyanna a little bit, but a little bit of the innocence gets lost with that, I think. And a little bit of the exploration and trying to figure things out is lost when it's just so available to you.
Yeah. I mean, my feeling about it is like when I was growing up, everything just seemed so far away for me. Like even though I was playing in a band, writing songs, doing these things, it was like, well, this doesn't sound anything like the stuff I listened to or what I wanted to sound like. It was just so sort of far beyond me. And so, but in a way, it was the thing to aspire to. And so it was the reason to just sort of keep at it. But it was so far away. And in a way, that was like kind of a cool thing that I guess I don't really think about too often anymore. Yeah. But back then, it was just so far away. And so I wrote, I started writing songs. And then I had a band in high school, which is sort of a continuation of the junior high band a bit. But that was the one that I really started writing more songs for in high school. But but we were also playing a lot of covers because that's what people like. What you do, yeah. And so it wasn't until we started playing shows in New York, we started playing at clubs like the Bitter End and Kenny's Castaways on Bleecker Street. Oh, nice. That we started writing. We were writing original songs and we were playing all original sets and stuff like that. Wow. So that would have been like 1992. By the time I was like 18 or 19.
Oh, okay. So what instrument did you start off with? What got you into playing music?
Right. Well, I started playing piano. Okay. And so I played piano. I started taking lessons when I was like kind of general music lessons when I was like maybe 3 or 4.
I was going to say, if you say 1 or 2 again, I'm just going to,
man. But give or take 2 years. So.
Wow.
And so,
in the womb.
And then yeah, basically. So then I started taking piano lessons, more piano lessons somewhere around like 2nd or 3rd grade, and classical piano lessons for a couple of years, which I didn't like at all. But it's the sort of stuff that like years later, when I'm doing things that are theory based, like writing string arrangements or stuff like that, that's the kind of stuff that I'm like, I'm so glad I had those couple of years of that sort of thing. So
right. Is that my English is awful this evening. is that the reason why when I'm looking at the credits, particularly on Nova Social, I see you playing so many instruments? I mean, there's acoustic and electric guitars, drum programming, mellotron, glockenspiel. Yeah. Is that? Did you study music, or is that all from the classical lessons that you had?
It's mostly from those lessons. It was basically like I took piano lessons all through, basically until I went to college. Oh, okay. But the other sort of key thing is somewhere around 9 or 10, one of my uncles that I mentioned before started teaching me guitar. And so somewhere around, I would say around the time I was maybe like 10 or 11, everything sort of clicked in terms of like what I was trying to do on guitar and what I was trying to do on piano. I was like, oh my God, this all makes sense. And I can play both, and I can play it in the sort of pop way that I want to play it, which at the time was just like, I don't know what I would have been into at the time. I would have been into like Bryan Adams, for instance, would have been someone I would have been really into when I was like 10 or 11.
Right,
and I'm like, great, I can play Bryan Adams songs now. So
make all the girls happy.
Well, and of course that's the idea. That's your sort of vision of it, is like, oh, girls will love this.
Yeah, all the girls love Bryan.
Yeah,
my sister would have gone nuts.
There you go.
So was the first album that I could see for you is Stretch.
Right.
When was that? Was that after doing covers and bar and bat mitzvahs?
Yeah, well, much later than that. So it would have been basically like right after I went to college at Northwestern outside Chicago in Evanston, and then I came back and I lived at home in Jersey for a number of years, and that was and I was like going into the city, and I was playing shows that were, I don't even know how to sort of describe it. I was really into like. I was into like Tom Waits and Ken Nordine, but I was also into power pop, and I was also into indie rock. And of course it was coming out of, the sort of post alternative stuff that I lived through in college. It was just a whole bunch of things trying to sort of like sort it all out. But I think I was like, well, but I definitely wanted to be, at heart, I guess it should be a rock band. And so Stretch was sort of, after sort of playing these places like CB's Gallery and Sidewalk Cafe in the city, doing these kind of like, I don't know, kind of weird, sort of offbeat shows were sort of a mix. Stretch became sort of, basically a pretty straightforward power pop rock band that was playing in the city at the time. So we were playing at like Arlene Grocery a bunch and Mercury Lounge and places like that. And the option through people I'd met, they were like, oh, if you want to record, the idea of working with Gene Holder, who was a member of the DBs, that was very exciting at the time. And so we basically, that first Stretch EP was made with him. So that was that one.
Yeah. And because I noticed, it seems like from what I could discern that the personnel for Stretch is pretty much the same as Nova Social, but the sound is very different.
Yeah. So basically what happened with that is like we were, it was two guitars, bass drums, and with a little bit of kind of a little bit of keyboards in there, but a pretty straightforward kind of band.
Yeah.
And then something before we started making there's two things. There's one thing for sure, which is that I went to record at a studio that my old band, Spontaneous Generation, recorded at, which is called The Clubhouse. And it's now in Rhinebeck, New York, but it used to be in Germantown. And I went up to do a session with my friend Christian, who was a member of Spontaneous Generation, but had his own group in the late 90s called Halden. And so we did a session, and I met the engineer at the Clubhouse, this guy, Daniel James Goodwin, also known as D. James Goodwin. And we hit it off immediately in a huge, huge way. And it kind of opened up the recording process in terms of like what I wanted to do and what Tom, my partner in Nova Social, do as well. And whereas like when we made the Stretch EP, we just didn't know how to get what we wanted it to sound like. But when we started the Jefferson Fracture, and like we had two songs to start with. So we had the song called Fingerprints, which is, this very kind of angular guitar sound.
That is a great song.
Oh, cool.
I love that song.
Yeah. I'm glad you like it.
My fingerprints are everywhere. It's no accident. My fingerprints are everywhere.
to me, that's like, it's very kind of like Gang of Four. It's very like, it's very dissonant, and it had all these things that I wanted to do. And then we had this other song called Horse Song Part 1.
At the end of the horse, I'm away from my desk, 'cause I'm passing the torch to an old brilliant thinker. I've got him hook, line, and sinker. A pale albatross hangs from a strand of floss next to the cross around the neck,
which is kind of like sort of piano driven, but I think I had John Cale's Paris 1919 in my head when I wrote it and stuff.
Okay.
So, and so like, very string oriented and stuff. And so like when we started making these recordings with this guy, Daniel, who is still one of my close friends and has mixed pretty much everything I've done. He mixed the As for the Future record.
Oh, cool.
We were able to go up there and we were able to make the music like we imagined it in our heads. And we weren't able to do that with the Stretch EP, but we were able to do it with this. And I think we were able to do it for the entirety of the Jefferson Fracture record. Is like, we really want to make an ambitious, interesting pop rock record. And that was what we attempted to do. And hopefully that's what we did.
Oh,
so.
Yeah. I mean, I was listening to some of Nova's Social, and the song that just stood out for me, I fell in love with the song, was There.
Oh, nice.
That song just stuck out, right?
Your friends are all close to inhuman, satanically, hedonistically wired. Don't you know, even Caligula got tired. He says, I can't write worth a dime, but still I wanna lead a literary life.
And like I was saying before, the music is amazing. It's awesome. But what was really clicking with me was the lyrics. Cool. Everything is just because it's your style of writing is so unique. It's so there's a healthy amount of snark, maybe.
Definitely at that time in that song, absolutely.
Yeah,
100%.
There's some skepticism and things. There's a little anger, but not like not like a Soundgarden, Alice in Chains kind of anger. It's a more I hate to say intellectual anger. It's a very well written and very well expressed anger.
Oh, good. Yeah. I think back on those times, the 90s, and a lot of my lyrics were very, I think, like the snark level was pretty high.
Yeah. So I'm glad that worked out, because you say that to some people, I'm like, what are you talking about? Don't be an asshole.
No, I couldn't agree more.
All right. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. And then the next album got a little more electronic as well. I guess maybe the music itself, just everything as the music progressed, from what I've noticed, it seemed to get a little more electronic, or a lot more electronic.
So there's kind of what I consider to be it wasn't quite this clean at the time, but now I look back on it, and there's really two phases of Nova Social.
Okay.
There's the sort of what I consider like the guitar rock phase, which was still kind of like, still had a lot of room for like kind of interesting, odd stuff there. Like there's a song on Other Words from Tomorrow's Dictionary, is to me a pretty straightforward rock record with some folk touches and some other things. But like there's a song called The Jitney, which to me was sort of like the beginning of like the sort of electronic stuff that we went into a little deeper. So those are the two phases, like, playing guitar rock for lack of a better term.
Right.
And that was basically what that was. And then my partner in Nova Social, Tom, and I, we started thinking about, we were into disco and we're into electronic music. I was really into string arranging because I'd made this record with the singer-songwriter Chris Mills, who's a very, very close friend of mine. And we made a record called The Wall to Wall Sessions in 2004, where we recorded the entire thing live with like a 4-piece string section, 5-piece horn section, bass, drums, 3 vocals, like all sorts of stuff. Actually, I looked at one of your old guests, Nora O'Connor. She would have been a vocalist on that session.
Oh, awesome.
And she's a good friend too, but that's another story.
I love Nora so much.
She's terrific.
So cool.
Yeah, she's great. Anyway, so I was really into string arrangements, and so we would listen to this, and Tom was playing, who was the bass player in Nova Social, was interested in playing more guitar. I was interested in playing less guitar, but I was interested in being more of like a front person, but also doing like string arrangements. Like I was going to see a bunch of shows around that time live. So like I would see, like I saw like Gorillaz, let's say. I saw them at the Apollo in like, I don't know, 2006, something like that. And they had like a 10-person string section, and the string section was like just kind of sitting there for like 60 to 70% of the show, just kind of like tapping along, but not playing anything. And I was like, no way. If we do something like this, strings on everything.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
and so that was the idea. And it was like, to Tom and I, it was a real challenge because it was like a lot of the music like that was like, well, the lyrics are about dancing, and it's like, can we do like a record that sounds like an electro disco record and none of the lyrics are about dancing? Like, can we do that? And so that was sort of where, and we kind of, and it could have or should have been a different project, but in some ways we were just like, there's enough of a connection to the songs that I was writing that we're like, oh, let's just keep it as Nova Social and we'll just do this. But it became basically a different band where it was like Tom played guitar, I sang, we had a keyboard player, we had another vocalist, and then we had 3 string players. And that was the band that played. We towards like 2013, 2014, we started playing with a rhythm section as well. But that was basically it. So it was it was a very like, so those are sort of the 2 kind of phases, I would say, of Nova Social. Okay.
Yeah. And then is that around the time you started working on some of your solo stuff, like Mortal Enemies?
Yeah.
And then the Carl Sandburg album, which I thought was beautiful. I loved that album.
Oh, cool. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Basically, it was around 2013 was when I made Mortal Enemies. I didn't put it out until 2 years ago because I'd just been sitting on it because I was so happy with how it came out. I was like, this is a very special record. It sounds great. Working with Josh Kaufman on this record sort of before he kind of took off to bigger endeavors, we made it together and it sounded like, I had envisioned it as like, okay, well, I've got all these kind of acoustic singer-songwriter songs that I'm not playing in this new electro version of Nova Social. So let's just kind of like clean out the closet and do that. But Josh had his own sort of vision for the record, being like, he was like drums on everything, changing things like the stuff he did with our cover of Crazy by Gnarls Barkley, where he's like, we're going to do the verses in 5. And I was like, okay. That was like kind of, crazy, but crazy for lack of a better word.
Right, yeah.
And when you're out there, okay, I was out of touch. It wasn't 'cause I didn't know enough. I knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy?
Yeah. And so, but it was a really special record. And so, but that was made sort of around the time that Nova Social sort of did our last kind of batch of stuff, which is like totally different. We were working with David Frank, of the electro R&B group The System, which was really exciting for us.
Yeah.
So it's like it was sort of doing two very different things at once. And Nova Social just kind of wound down, and I was able to kind of take the experience I had had with Josh making Mortal Enemies and sort of transfer that into making the Carl Sandburg record, because the Carl Sandburg record was a very rough idea I had in like 1998.
Oh,
where
wow.
I read sort of, there's a collection of different poems called Harvest Poems.
Okay.
And I looked at the Chicago poems section. There's actually, Chicago poems is like 148, 150 poems. But I looked at the 16, and the first few, they looked like Randy Newman lyrics to me. Like I was like, I feel like there's something that could be done with these. It'd be so cool to set these to music. But it was like a thing that I just sort of put on the back burner for like 10 years. And then finally started writing the songs, I don't know, let's say around 2007, 2008. And then somewhere around 2013, I realized that 2016 was going to be the centenary of the publication of Chicago Poems. So Chicago Poems was published in 1916. And I was like, okay, there's my deadline. And so all these sort of rough ideas I had about it, with like, there's going to be a lot of strings and horns, and the guest element, I think, came kind of late, relatively speaking. But what it was going to be, what it was going to sound like, was something I'd already sort of started formulating. Oh. And then somewhere around 2014, I really sort of dug into like finishing the songs, starting to write the arrangements. I worked with a good friend, John Natchez, who's these days he's in the War on Drugs. That's his like kind of main group. But we worked on like, he helped me finish some of the songs that I didn't know how I was going to finish them and stuff like that. And it was just kind of scheduled everything up to the month to try and like get it out by 2016. Yeah. And it was great. And that was, to me, that was a very, very special project, one that I'm really proud of and happy about. So.
Hog butcher for the world, tool maker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads, and the nation's.
So when you're doing a project like that, do you have to go and get permission to use the poem, the poem?
Yeah, I didn't. The poems are all public domain, which was super helpful. I had a friend who is a classical composer, and he does a lot of work with texts that other people have written. And he's like, "Don't write a note until you get the permission." And I was like, "I think this is public domain." He's like, "Okay, well then you're good." Yeah.
Oh, if I forget everything, just go ahead.
Yeah, basically. So yeah. But even then, besides that, I went down to the Carl Sandburg home, which is outside Asheville, North Carolina. It's in the town of Flat Rock, and so that was the house that Sandburg lived in for the last I want to say 20 or so years of his life, maybe a little less. Okay. And so I kind of became friends with the people who worked at the Sandburg home, and then when the album came out, I did a concert down there, and I met Carl Sandburg's granddaughter, who was amazing and such a wonderful, wonderful person.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I think it was important, even though and she had said something to me like very complimentary about like, this is one of the finest, because people have said his poetry music many times, and this is one of the finest ones I've heard. That really meant a lot to me. So
that is amazing. And you got some amazing people on that album with you. Yeah. Former guest Kelly Hogan,
there
Jeff
you
Tweedy,
go.
Some amazing people, and it's really such a beautiful album. I really enjoyed listening to it, and I only had a chance to listen to it once before having to go and listen to some more stuff from you, because I have to, with everything that you're doing, I have no idea where you're going. the sound changes so much. So, I mean, let's just get into it, because one of the weirdest changes to me is from this to bossa nova and samba and going into the music of As for the Future.
Right.
It's such a shift. It's funny because I read the promo material, but it was a little bit of time between me reading it and listening to the music. Yeah. And so I guess maybe had forgotten the description of the music, saying bossa nova, samba, modern Brazilian. And so I just hit the link and I'm listening. I'm like, the first two notes, I'm like, oh, this is so different. And then I went back to the material. I'm like, okay, now I see where we're going now. And I loved it because, like I told you earlier on, it's so different from what I usually listen to that it definitely strikes a chord and it catches my attention because of the difference. Right.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, one thing just to sort of relate it to the Sandburg project in a way is the Sandburg project was an entirely acoustic record. I think there were no electric instruments on it, with the exception of there's like a farfisa on one song, and I'm pretty sure that's the only electric instrument. Everything else is like strings or horns or voice.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's sort of it. So in a one way that sort of is a connection sonically to As for the Future, and sort of the other thing to kind of that sort of leads me there is and we can talk about this a bit, is I've been a huge fan of Brazilian music for let's say 25 years.
Okay.
Or now, at this point, maybe even a little more. And so there were kind of elements of Brazilian influence songs in my catalog.
Okay.
And so there's a song on Mortal Enemies called Bobby's Insecurities. Right. And that to me is definitely like a Brazilian Tropicalia influence song. And it maybe might not have been that Tropicalia, but Josh brought all these elements to it that really made it sound like a Nos Mutantes song or something. So
okay.
Trim away all of Bobby's insecurities, the pain inside that brings out all these drunken nights and felonies.
And then the record I made after Carl Sandburg's Chicago Poem, I'm a big fan of concept.
Yeah.
And it works. I don't know if that comes across.
I'm getting that feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. But so the record I made after Carl Sandburg is the Appointees Volumes 1 and 2, songs about Trump cabinet appointee. And so that record, even on that one, as I was writing those songs, and now it's a very lyrically driven record because I had to learn about all these people in order to write songs about them.
You can't write a concept album without learning about it, right?
Yeah, basically. Well, you could try and fake it, but I was like, and in a way, well, in another way too, and I put this to someone recently, is that, by writing that record, it would force myself to do research, and I wouldn't have to get bogged down with the stuff later in the day. I'd be like, nope, I was already there. I'm not gonna get wound up about this stuff. I was already there.
Right.
So, I did the research, and now I'm off the clock. So, but there were a couple of songs that are very Brazilian influenced in that batch. There's one called The Non-Believers, and there's one called Mechanical Bull.
Feelings uncoil, their opinions fluctuate like the price of oil.
And I remember, and something that kind of, there were a handful of things that sort of led me towards what became As for the Future. And one was, I was doing a show right around the time the first volume of The Appointees came out, and my friend and collaborator, one of the collaborators in As for the Future, Dave Derby of the band Gramercy Arms, was he had heard I think he heard one of the songs and he was like, "Oh man, that stuff is great. It's like Tropicalia, you know. It's very like it's like topical and it's got a protest element to it, but it's like cool Brazilian music."
Right,
and
you can dance to it.
Yeah. And
protest
I was like,
music you can dance to.
Yeah. And I was like, "Oh, that's true." And that was one of the things that kind of, I don't know, helped me towards this. You know, one of the things, like I said, I love Brazilian music and had for many years, but I was always sort of wary of like, what do I have to add to this? Right. Especially in the late 90s and the early aughts, listening to, I don't know if you're familiar with the Arto Lindsay solo records that he had made. They're amazing. I don't think they're streamable right now, which is really annoying. There's like
make a note of that.
There's like there's a compilation that's up, which is fine. There's a good like sort of one first disc of all this stuff, but I don't think any of these songs are streamable. At least they're not on Tidal, but they might not be on Spotify either. At any rate, but they're amazing. And he's of Brazilian heritage, and so he knew Caetano Veloso. He knows Caetano Veloso. I went to go see Caetano Veloso a couple weeks ago, and he gave Arto Lindsay a shout out in the audience in this giant theater at NJ Pack in Newark. Man. But he wrote mostly English language Brazilian influenced records that he made in New York, and they're amazing. They're so great. And so part of that was like, well, I'm not going to, why should I do this? You know, he's making these amazing records. Why should I do this or attempt to do this? So, you know, I have no business. But a lot of, I think the last leading up to, let's say from like, I don't know, 2017 through to 2020, when As for the Future like legitimately sort of started, we started recording and everything. A lot of it was just like kind of gathering up the courage and the purpose of doing this. Like, is this something that makes sense for me to do? Okay. And finally deciding that it was, but it was a matter of like asking the questions in order to get to that answer. Okay.
Well, you answered like 3 questions without me having to ask them, which is awesome. That's great. Yeah. Because I was curious, and like, how did you get into this genre? What made you write this in this style? So I love it when I don't even have to ask the question. But the band is made up of some amazing people, but 2 questions initially. Right. How did you pick the band? I mean, did you pick it, or was it more of a group effort? And then how did you decide on the name of the band?
Okay, cool. Well, the people who are in the band, and by the band, I could also say like for the recording, like it's now there's a live band that plays live, and most of those people are on the record. Okay. I think they're all on the record, but in starting to record it, first of all, it was done during the heart of pandemic. So basically, wow. So basically, the person who plays drums on 2/3 is a friend, Brian Cantor, amazing drummer who's based in the Berkshires area in Massachusetts. And we had talked about, we were talking like, oh, we both love Brazilian music. We should do something. And I started writing these songs, and we got together to play them and stuff. But it was during the pandemic that we were actually able to make it, which in some ways kind of forced us to do it. Like if we weren't all locked down, it might have just been a little bit too much it might have been too intimidating to actually pull off. Really? But because it was during the pandemic, it was, and everyone who I worked with, had remote recording capabilities. I bought a new nylon guitar, and it was basically like, all right, I'm going to record the guitar part and a basic vocal to like a click track. Okay. And then I'll start sending the tracks out to people. And the next thing we know, we'll have recordings.
We'll have an album.
And so I started with Brian, sent back his drum tracks. And then there's a friend who I played bass with, David Lismy. He's a bass player who I worked with actually the vocalist in Nova Social, this guy Xavier. He has done and still does these Ladies of Soul tributes around every Valentine's Day at Joe's Pub. And David was the bass player for a bunch of these shows, and we met doing that. And I was like, oh, it'd be great to work with him one day. Here's something this is a little creepy on my part. He is one of the few people that I he's the one person. I gave up Spotify. I'm now on Tidal, and he's on Tidal too. But he was on Spotify, and we were on Spotify, and you can follow someone, and you can see what they listen to.
Yeah.
And I saw that David was listening to a bunch of like Brazilian stuff, like samba, and I was like, And so I knew this now, and reached out to him and said, "Hey, are you interested in this new project?" And he was like, "Absolutely." And but I had the heads up.
Some will call it Spotify stalking; others just call it research.
Right, exactly. Either way.
I'm going to go with research because I have to stalk people for the podcast. So
yeah, there you go.
I'll go with research.
Right. So there were those two. Those are the first two to sort of start with. And through David was the one that had the contact with Mauro Rufusco, the percussionist.
Okay.
Who, and he was someone that I had known about, and I was like, oh my gosh, wow, that's he's legendary. Like that's amazing. But he was really like right away, which was so cool.
Oh,
I mean,
awesome.
that was, to me, that was like a very, very encouraging thing. And it was great because I sent him tracks to start recording this stuff right around the time that David Byrne's American Utopia was on HBO. And so I'd be like watching and be like, oh my God, I'm playing with this guy. This is so exciting.
That is awesome.
So that was amazing. And then there were some others. Stephanie Sanders, who I had been playing a bunch of shows with, added some keyboards. And then the sort of next, and Ryan Keberly, who's a trombone player who I went to Cuba with. I went to Cuba on these sort of two tours led by, I don't know if you're familiar with Ned Sublet. He's he's a musician, and he's a historian, and he's a writer. He's an amazing, amazing person, but he's like kind of the authority on Cuba and Cuban music. Like he wrote a book on Cuban music.
I'm writing that down too.
Yeah, he's incredible. The book is called Cuba and Its Music, I think is what it's called. And when when the borders opened up again, and he was able to do these trips to take groups down to Cuba on these like music tours, and that was amazing because we would see like anywhere from 3 to 5 musical performances every day. And, and it was just incredible. And so Ryan went on the second of those trips that I went on. And I found out that he was into Brazilian music. He had like, basically he comes from like a sort of Brazilian jazz sort of take on things. Like he's a jazz player. And so he was an obvious person to work on it as well. And coming back to this thing about pandemic is like Mauro and Ryan were and are incredibly busy people. Yeah. but because of the pandemic, they were just around, and they both had remote recording capabilities. Man. And so they could start laying down tracks on these songs. And so there was all these, great instruments. And in some ways I could like keep going, like I did add, there's the flute player who I'd worked with before named Roberta, and she added flute on Cohen for the Music Business. And,
that is a great song.
If a record drops in a forest, does anyone hear it? Are the animals and birds in the wild your only fans? Is the whoosh of the wind and the babbling brook the equivalent of the universe clapping its hands?
Oh, thank you.
That is one of my top picks on this album. I like
cool.
The lyrics, the lyric about band campers. That's just, oh gosh, that's just one of those things where your lyrics make me pay attention. Yeah. And when I heard, it was just one of those things. I heard it, I'm like, that is brilliant. I love that.
Cool.
And that's one of the things I want to say about your lyrics is that with some music, you can put it on in the background and it's there. You're listening to it, but you're doing other things. I can't do that with your music because I am fascinated by your lyrics.
Oh, wow.
So you're paying attention to Paul Simon is evident, and it paid off. Yeah. So I thank you for such thoughtful lyric writing.
Oh, my pleasure. I mean, the thing, just to say this really quick, is like the thing about it was the lyric writing, the lyrics of these songs, the As for the Future songs, this batch at least, because I have a newer batch that we've been sort of slowly working on, and even like 3 of them are actually instrumental pieces. But it was the lyrics that kind of enabled me to feel like I had something to bring to this. Like one of my fears about doing Brazilian music is you make the music and then the lyrics are like, everything's chill. Like a very like kind of stereotypical view of what American musicians view Brazilian music to be. And so one of the ways that I kind of got into it was reading translations of a handful of Brazilian artists. Okay. There's a songwriter named Chico Buarque, who I am a huge fan of. He's amazing. And reading translations of his lyrics, it wasn't even like I was doing something similar to him, or I've tried to do something similar to him, though I'm sure his influence has seeped in a little bit. But it was more just like, because he had such a distinct thing, that gave me permission to feel like, well, I guess I have my thing. I'll try it too. And so that was sort of where it started. And so I want to say it was somewhere around 2018 where songs like Going for the Music Business and Encyclopedia of Songs.
There's a song down in the ocean, a song high in the sky, a song deep in a canyon that can swim and fly. And I will travel my whole life to find it, or I will wait here my whole life until it comes to me. There's a song in every traffic jam, in every subway.
And the mob, like they all kind of started taking shape around the same time. And it's only because I felt confident enough as a lyricist that I could actually commit to the whole endeavor.
So you mentioned the mob. That is a great song. I'm assuming you're the lyricist and Alexia Bomtempo is singing your lyrics.
That's correct, yeah.
Hearing her, just incredible. I am in love with her voice.
Yeah.
But hearing her voice singing, if shit goes south, that's just the way it goes.
Yep. Yep. Totally.
It's such a juxtaposition. It kind of fits because, like you're saying, the music is, hey, everything's chill, and then her singing, hey, if shit goes south, this is the way it goes. It's a juxtaposition, but it fits.
If shit goes south, that's just the way it goes. Shit goes south, oh, that's just the way it goes. And then you'll see some trouble, like nobody knows.
Yeah,
I love it.
And the thing to me that's really great about that is she picked that song. Like I said, when I met her, which I met her on there was a Zoom. There's the venue here in New York called Joe's Pub, which is where we have our record release show in June. And there was like a kind of artist Zoom where artists are talking about everything they're going through in the pandemic, and, who they are, and we'll make a connection and stuff. And I'd never met Alexia before, but, she said, hi, I'm Alexia Bomtempo. I'm a Brazilian jazz artist based in Brooklyn. And I was like, and I reached out to her and I said, I'm working on a new Brazilian project and I've already finished 3 songs, but we have more to work on. And would you be interested in singing on it? And she was like, yeah, this sounds great. And so she was the one that picked out, she was like, the mob. That was her first choice.
Oh, awesome.
Which was so great because I was like, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Because I'm so excited to hear you sing that. And so that was really, really great. So
my favorite on the album is Shell.
Oh, nice.
That is my absolute favorite off the entire album. I can't even really express why. There's just the entire song, the lyrics, the music, everything.
A voice that gives you only expletives. The shell of a man you picked up off the sand, took him back to your chair to see what
It's just beautiful. It's my favorite on the album, and
oh, great.
I am hoping. You mentioned playing live. Are you taking this out, or are you staying regional? Is it going to be maybe a little tour in the works?
I think we're gonna. I mean, we'll start regionally. I would say we haven't played outside of New York yet, so hopefully we'll be able to play like upstate or Philly or maybe Boston or DC. But we'll kind of start to test the waters, getting out of Dodge and playing elsewhere, and we'll see. We'll sort of see how it goes.
Okay. How did you come up with the name for the band, As for the Future?
Yeah, right. So the name. Let's see if I can. Hold on a second. Let me just grab it right here since it's right here on. There's a Brazilian author named Clarice Lispector.
Okay.
And she was sort of, it's a very interesting kind of experimental abstract novelist and short story writer. And so she has a book called The Hour of the Star, which that's kind of like her best known book.
Okay.
And there's like a kind of thing up top where she talks about sort of alternate titles of the book. It's like The Hour of the Star, It's All My Fault, or The Hour of the Star, or Let Her Deal with It, or The Right to Scream. And then right below her name, there it is, As for the Future.
Wow.
So that was sort of, I liked the Brazilian connection of her, her writing. Like I read The Hour of the Star and it's a really cool book. And so I was like, all right, I think that's a cool name.
Yeah, I like it. It's different. It's unique, and it's from doing almost 400 episodes at this point. One of the hardest things is to pick a band name that hasn't been used by 3 other bands, simultaneously. So
yeah, totally.
I think you may have done it.
Yeah, I pulled it off. I mean, I got all the like social names, and so that was certainly an element.
Yeah. Well, I have enjoyed this album so much. It's been a huge change of pace, a very welcome change of pace, and thank you for making it because it's such it's such happy music. Even if the lyrical content is a little snarky sometimes, a little little angry. No, I'm not gonna say angry. A little. I don't even know how to classify the mob. It's just that's just an adventure. And I love it. But everything is just. It's a very. I don't want to. It's a great listen. It's just. There's no other way to say it because everything else just kind of doesn't come across as it doesn't express it enough because it's an album I can put on for anybody.
Oh, great.
And I think they're going to like it. So where can people find it? How can they order it?
So it's available on Bandcamp, asforthefuture.bandcamp.com.
No, damn Bandcampers.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They're going to have to get wind of it.
Buy it before you listen to it.
Yeah. But yeah, and it'll be available on vinyl. And also on deluxe edition CD, we're getting these CDs pressed to where we have one of the things that we had made was a couple alternate versions of some songs, and then four dub mixes of songs as well. So
that is fascinating. That's worth buying the CD just for that because I always love hearing alternate mixes of stuff. That's just I don't know. I'm the kind of guy that I go out, if I enjoy a band, I'll look for demos. I'll always buy the deluxe version of anything to get the alternate version to the demo version.
Yeah.
So that's right up my alley. So I'm glad you're doing that.
This was an idea that I had when we were making the record where, like Ryan would be playing trombone and he would like play more than we needed for just the song. So I was like, well, we'll use it in some other setting. And like, we have these like, large group vocals where we have like 8 to 10 people singing these lines and Mauro was playing all this percussion and I thought it'd be really fun to just have Daniel, who was mixing it, just take a day and do like all these different versions of that stuff. And I love how that stuff came out. I think it's really, really fun.
Oh, that is so cool. So, I can't wait to hear that stuff. That's going to be awesome. Well, how can people follow you? Is there social media? I mean, you mentioned some social media accounts. How can people find those and follow you and hopefully maybe see a show?
Yeah. Well, Master, the main website is asforthefuturemusic.com.
Okay.
But most of the social accounts are As for the Future. So it's facebook.com/asforthefuture, Instagram, TikTok, SoundCloud. They're all just the name of the band.
Awesome. All right. Well, look, this has been a blast. Thank you so much.
Oh, my gosh.
I'm so glad.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. When an album this unique comes my way, I want to know more and more about it. I want to know how you got to how a guy from New York, New Jersey got to make a Brazilian album. It's just crazy story. So thank you for sharing it with me.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. This means a lot. Thank you. I appreciate that.